There's live and then there's live. And today you could say is a live show. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Mike New Haven podcast. This is episode 178. If you haven't checked out episodes 176 and 77, that's because I did a double header on Friday. First up was Murray Weiss, longtime crime reporter in New York City. And then the nightcap was the Street Crime Chronicles, a look back at the NYPD Street Crime Unit with two of its alumni, retired NYPD Detective Bill Ryan, who did 2 of his 20 years in street crime, and retired NYPD Lieutenant Peter Pranzo, who did many of his years, 21 years in total in the NYPD in street crime. So today it's live because my next guest is mobile. You know, the happenings of a reporter in New York City. Since 1989, he's been reporting in New York City, but he started originally in my home state of Connecticut. We'll get into that as we go. Started out at CBS affiliate WFSB before joining WABC Channel 7, where he's been ever since in 1989. He's also the current president and the Academy's New York chapter, which awards Emmys to New York area media figures. He's received a few of those himself. And that would be Mr. NJ Burkett, who after a year of trying to get this podcast going, finally he's here. The chase has ended. The restraining order will kick in as soon as the podcast is over. NJ, welcome. How are you?
Great. I'm doing great, Mike. Thank you very much for having me. And I'm glad we did work this out ultimately. But as you can see, and as your viewers and listeners, well, viewers can see, listeners can imagine, I mean, we're on the road here. We're on our way to a story right now in Midtown. There's Brian White, our photographer.
Hello, Brian. Thank you for making an inadvertent cameo in this podcast. As NJ's in the heart of Manhattan. At least the weather's nice. Anyway, let's get right into it because you're a busy man. I don't want to keep you too long. You started out, you're a native of Elizabeth, New Jersey. So you spent the first 18 years of your life in Elizabeth. Tell me about growing up there.
Well, you know, I think that growing up in industrial New Jersey has actually given me a great perspective on life. You know, I wasn't born a rich kid. I wasn't born, into any kind of privilege. So I think that growing up where I did, where so many of my friends were the children of immigrants, and so many of my friends, came from all parts. We all grew up together. And so I think that growing up in that kind of multi-ethnic, multicultural environment really provided a great background for me for the job that I'm doing. I feel like having grown up in Elizabeth, and I went to Elizabeth High School, Mike, which was the only public high school for the entire city, except for the vocational technical high school, which was Thomas Edison at the time. So everybody in the city went to the same high school, essentially. And as a result, the cross-section of people that I went to school with was really a very rich, diverse group of people. And so I think it really helped prepare me for what I'm doing now. I feel like I can walk really anywhere in the city, anywhere in the world, and feel comfortable. So it's a good background for somebody who does the job that I do.
If you have a question for NJ, of course, if you're watching either via LinkedIn or via YouTube, type it in the chat and I'll make sure he sees it at the proper time. So centering further on your education, you went to Columbia University, you have a BA in political science and a master's in international affairs. Now, you have covered events overseas, particularly in Israel, as we'll talk about a little bit later. But with a degree like that, was the goal specifically journalism, or was the interest more, hey, dare I say, being a diplomat?
Right. Well, sometimes to get the story, you have to be a diplomat, you know. So I could go to Washington Heights and be a diplomat. I can go to Brownsville and be a diplomat. I can go to Park Avenue and be a diplomat. So diplomatic skills enter into it. But no, that was not my career objective. My career objective, when I was first getting into it, was to be a foreign correspondent for the network. That's what I wanted to do. And, you know, it's interesting, you know, the trajectory that your life takes, that your career takes. Now, one thing sort of led to another. I ended up on TV in New York City with the largest ABC affiliate in America and the highest rated local newscast in the country. And I ended up with a lot of overseas assignments. I mean, if you look at the resume and you look at the places that I've been and the events that I've covered, you know, I have essentially over the years, you know, been a foreign correspondent for a local television station. So I was able to indulge a lot of the things that I liked, and international relations was my academic interest.
Now, we'll get into your beginnings at WFSB and, of course, your 1989 arrival to WABC in a second. But, you know, you bring up an interesting point because you went, as I mentioned, specifically to Israel during the Intifada, particularly of 2000. Now, New York, where you've worked, basically all of your career is a cultural melting pot. That expression has been thrown around more times than either of us can count.
No, and I don't think of it, Mike, as a melting pot either, by the way. Because melting pot as a metaphor implies that we're all sort of dumped into this cauldron and mixed together, and then that's what a New Yorker is. That really doesn't apply, in my view. I mean, obviously people will differ. I sort of agree with David Dinkins' metaphor, and that is that it's a gorgeous mosaic of New York is not a monolith. New York is a collection of neighborhoods, and reporters, correspondents, people who do what I do, need to recognize that and need to pay respect and attention to all of the constituencies of New York, because in my view, we're all New Yorkers, but we come from different places with different cultures, different ethnicities, in many cases, different languages. So as long as we recognize that, I think we understand the city better.
Of course, I would totally agree with that assessment. That said, being over there, whether we mean to or not, sometimes, and it's not that we're jaded or cynical, we have our minds made up about a certain region or locale that we've never been to, either because we read something in the newspaper or we saw something on television. To be there, to see it up close, as you did in the case of Israel, particularly in 2000, how has that enhanced your worldview as not only a journalist, but also as a person?
Well, I find the Israeli-Palestinian issue particularly fascinating and intellectually stimulating because in my view, there is merit to the positions of both sides. I come into it not Jewish. I come into it not as Muslim. I'm a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, from New Jersey. And I think in some ways that helped me to look at the dispute really with an open mind and a clear slate. That said, I have learned so much by being in that region so many times over so many years. And I have friends on both sides of that dispute. And when things happen over there, because look, some good things have happened over there for sure. But I was going to say, when awful things happen over there, it upsets me greatly because I know the pain that's felt on both sides, because I've been there in situations with my friends and the people and the contacts that I've made over there, and I see how it pains how it pains my friends. And so, having developed relationships with people on that side of it, on that side of the world, it has helped me understand the nuances. And so I think in a way, right? I mean, that's why I've been sent over there so many times by WABC. I'm in a unique position to recognize what's going on. And I think I'm also maybe in a way an unbiased report or account of what's going on. I do the best I can. I don't have an agenda. That's a larger, issue that I do like to discuss because, I think that, I come from a very traditional school, quote unquote, of journalism, where I believe that the reporter should come into the assignment with an open mind and willing to, and with the objective of being to render a fair and unbiased account of whatever the assignment is.
On a quick side note, if you can hear some noise for the audience, that's the birds in my backyard that decided to sing now. They were quiet all morning, but of course, when I'm out here now, they want to start chirping. So apologies for that, because I am outside recording this.
No, it's good. I like it. It's very peaceful with compared to, Midtown Manhattan. It's nice. You have the best of both. You have me in Midtown, and you've got you in Connecticut with birds chirping. I think it's good.
Yeah, it's a good counterbalance. NJ Burkett is our guest on the Mike to New Haven podcast, a long tenured reporter in New York City, particularly with WABC's Channel 7 since 1989. So just to touch briefly on your Connecticut years, what's interesting is that a lot of the time you spent it in Hartford as a reporter, which is where FSB, I should say, is located, which is, of course, the state's capital. A lot of the political happenings are happening there, of course, and it trickles down statewide. We certainly hear it, or feel it, I should say, here in New Haven, where I've been in my entire life. So being there, even though, listen, it's not Gracie Mansion, it's not Albany, how interesting was it for a young guy just breaking into the business?
Mike, you've cut out on me here.
Okay, you're back now. Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
I lost you. I guess you lost me. I don't know.
I was saying that, for a young guy breaking into the business at the time with WFSB, especially working in the state's capital in Hartford, where so many of the political happenings, they stem from there and they trickle down statewide. How interesting was that for you?
Well, it's interesting about that because, yes, I was at a Hartford-based station, but I was the New Haven correspondent for the Hartford station. So, and Hartford, the Hartford New Haven market's a very interesting market because you have the CBS station that's based in Hartford. Then you have the NBC station that's also based up there. And then you have the ABC station, which is in New Haven. So I was hired at WFSB to be the New Haven correspondent for the Hartford station. So in a way, I joke with people. I say, I was a foreign correspondent for WFSB that covered New Haven. And it was, to me, I felt like New Haven was a fantastic place to live. And I mean, there's still, times when I think about it very wistfully, I miss it. Those 3 years that I spent in Connecticut trying to build my career, trying to see if I could make it, were fantastic years. I had a lot of people in Hartford that took really good care of me. And I say Hartford, New Haven, photographers that really gave it their all for my stories, editors that put some beautiful pieces together, and people that taught me a lot. When I was really pretty young, I was hired in Hartford and I was 24 years old. I was very young. I had just turned 24, and it was a huge break to get. I'd sent tapes all over the country, Mike, to try to get a TV job. And mind you, before that, I'd never been on television as a TV reporter. I'd been working behind the scenes. I had been a news writer. I'd been a desk assistant. I did a lot of these things, but was never on camera. Eventually, I got, the tapes together that I could send around because I cajoled cameramen to shoot stand-ups for me, tape editors to edit a resume tape for me, all because these folks, kind of like this little kid out of college who, wanted to make it in television. They're all willing to help me, and they were amazing. And so I eventually got a tape together and sent it all over the country. And I got rejected in Charleston, South Carolina, at WCSC Television, Charleston. And I was so dejected, so upset. I think at the time is 109th market in the country. But then 6 weeks later, I got hired at WFSB in Hartford, which at the time was the 23rd market. So, I got just incredibly lucky. And I was resolved to make sure that I made the most of that career opportunity. So I worked day and night. I would work the night shift. I'd work the morning shift. I would work whenever they would give me the chance to work. It wasn't about the money for me, and the money was was very, very well. I mean, I don't want to put it down, but I don't know how I made it. Paying my student loans, paying my car loans, paying my rent. I had a 3-year contract in Hartford, Connecticut. Okay, in 1980. When did I get the contract? 1986. I made $21,500 the first year. I made $23,000 the second year. My third year of the contract called for me to be paid $25,000. I cleared $32,000. And worked and did all these different shifts, because every shift you come in and you work, it's an opportunity. You're rolling the TV news dice that you could end up on the big story, and the big story would be something I could put on my resume tape. And so that's what that was all about. And then, I ended up on some really big stories, and the resume tape got better and better, and then eventually that's what got me hired at WABC.
So getting there in 1989, we're talking with NJ Burkett here in the Mike to New Haven podcast. I mean, you're walking into a newsroom that at that time has Ernie Anastas, Roz Abram, the late great Bill Butel, amongst a slew of others. So, it can be a little bit daunting, but nonetheless, you learn so much either indirectly or directly. So much like I ask my cops and firemen when I get them on the show, well, who'd you learn from in the firehouse, or who'd you learn from in the precinct? Who did you, either by talking with them or just by sheer observance, pick up the most from in that newsroom, either working in front of the camera or behind it?
Yeah, well, let me walk you back just a moment,
Sure.
Mike. And I warned you before the podcast that I tend to be too detailed in my answers. So if I get a little far afield, the answers, you'll let me know. Because as a reporter, I don't like it when people don't answer my question, or they sort of blow it off and don't give enough detail. So I kind of go to the other extreme when I'm interviewed. So I'm not a good interview subject. I'm a good interviewer, but not necessarily a good interview subject. But what I'll say about that is that it's important to know that the late, great Bill Butel was my mentor at Channel 7. I met Bill when I was in grad school at Columbia. And without getting into a long story about that, Bill and I really sort of hit it off. And he said, look, if there's ever anything I can do to help you, I will, because I think you belong in this business. I mean, that's a direct quote. And I mean, he said that to me at the time. I never forgot it. Bill was a great man. In my view, Bill is the patron saint of Eyewitness News. And, Bill ultimately walked my resume tape into the news director's office and showed it to him, when I was in Hartford. And eventually I got a job offer at WABC, but not before I got a job offer at WPLG, Channel 10, the ABC affiliate in Miami. And then it came down to a choice of, let's see, WABC or WPLG. And believe me, there's so many reasons that, so many things that would recommend going to WPLG in Miami. But the opportunity to work at WABC was just something I couldn't pass up. So all of that said, when I walked into the newsroom at WABC, yes, it was very intimidating. And I think some of that was, genuine. That there was, a lot about it that was intimidating, but then a lot of it was also in my head. I mean, look, here I am. I mean, I watch these guys on television, and Bill never liked it when I would say, wow, I grew up watching you on TV. He's like, he didn't like that. And now, I'm on the subway and 30-something-year-old people will come up to me and they'll say, wow, I grew up watching you on TV. And I'm like, really? You're like, how many years old? And then, you do the math. He said, wow, I've been on TV for 32 years at WABC. So, I mean, I get that. So, I mean, you could even say, do the math that people in their 40s, watch me on TV. So that's just kind of crazy. But it was intimidating, because it was a different newsroom, environment back then. Newsrooms, and I'm not just saying just at WABC, the newsroom at Channel 5 when I worked there as a news writer, the newsroom in Hartford to a lesser extent. These were not, gentle places. They were not always civil places. People could scream across the newsroom at each other, shouting over the wire machine that was spitting out copy, or the phones that were ringing, the typewriters that were clanking. I mean, they were sometimes volatile environments. Somebody missed a story, the news director would come charging out of the newsroom and say, why did we miss that story? What were you thinking? And it's like, that doesn't happen now. It won't happen now. So yes, it was intimidating. Some of it was in my head. And then also remember, Bill brought me into the newsroom. So I think that by extension, people me a chance, out of respect for Bill. Then I had to earn the rest of the respect on my own.
It's interesting in you getting there because the 90s.
Did I lose you, Mike?
I can hear you just fine. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. I can hear you now. Did you hear all that?
Yeah, I heard all that. I caught it. The frame is a little bit frozen on your end, but I can still hear you. As long as I can hear you, we'll work around it. So that said, I mean, I feel like a new niche was hit in the 90s in terms of how news, not just in New York City, but really nationally, and dare I say internationally, was covered, because the big stories of that decade coincided with the tech boom. I mean, in New York alone, you had, of course, the high crime rates of that era. In 1990, there was 2,627 murders. The 1993 World Trade Center bombing. Going back to 90, we were talking about Israel and Palestine earlier. Mara Kahani was assassinated. You get the shooting of Ari Halberstrom in 1994, the crash of TWA Flight 800 in 1996. Those are just some of the things that went down. And City Hall during the Giuliani era was an especially busy place. That coincided with the advent of new forms of technology that dramatically helped journalism. How do you feel those two things, the big story and the big tech boom, went hand in hand, if at all?
Well, look, I mean, we had, I mean, my visibility over the last 30 years is really pretty remarkable in terms of the advances in news gathering and the ability to tell a story. We, I mean, when I first started at WFSB, it would have been 1986. We barely had cell phones. There was a time, when I first started there, you'd have to wear this thing on your belt that was called a beeper, and it was the size of a pack of cigarettes, and you'd clip it to your belt, and the original beepers didn't even have like a digital display. They would simply, give off a tone, and then when you heard that tone, you'd have to go find a payphone, dial this 800 toll-free number that would hook you up to the assignment desk, and then find out that, oh, sorry, we paged the wrong person. It's like, oh no. And I just driven off the highway, and now I've got to get back on the highway, get back on my story, find, I'd taken the time to find a payphone. So just the advent of, cellular telephonics was a huge advance for news gathering. And then, now look at what's happened now, the ability that I can just take my phone, right? And this thing shoots virtually in broadcast quality. So, I mean, I could shoot something happening out here in the street. And I've got a proprietary app on the phone that with a couple switches back there in the control room, they can put me on live television, to 1 million people, just like that. And just with my phone. So the advances in technology that I've seen, that people my generation in this business have seen, are just extraordinary. The idea that we edit in the van. I mean, back here you can't quite see it, but there's all our technology is in the back of this Eyewitness news truck. I think it's a Chevy Tahoe. But yeah, we don't even need to have a microwave mask anymore. There's a remote transmission box that allows us to, walk and talk. I mean, when you saw George Floyd demonstrations, people walking along, literally for miles with the demonstrators while still doing live TV. Back in the day, you would have needed a very long camera cable.
Right. No, of course. And to that point, it feels like from that standpoint, I'm not knocking. It's just kind of the way of technology and the way of the world by extension. Anybody can be a journalist now. Anybody can grab, their phones out. And sometimes it's a little facetious. You've seen it. Oh, world star.
Does.
Exactly.
Anybody can be a journalist now, and anybody does. And the problem with that is that you have people that are not professionals who do this and spread misinformation, disinformation, false information. And that's a consequence, right, of the advances in technology. There are people out there, that make my job that much harder. There are people out there who, who by virtue of what they are doing are discrediting or attempting to discredit people like me that come to work to try to do an honest, as I suggested, before, an honest rendering of the facts. I don't come into a story saying, okay, this is my feeling, and I want everybody to know what I think of what's going on, of what my assignment is. That's not what I do.
One of the major stories that you covered, and ABC did a 20-year special on it, of course, which was brilliant, was, of course, 9/11. You got down there as both towers were on fire. I'm not going to show, out of respect for the victims, I'm not going to show that clip, but it was a terrifying brush with death for you, particularly when the South Tower collapsed. You were right there. And what strikes me is standing right behind you was Chief Peter Gansey, who did not make it that day. First Deputy Commissioner Bill Thean of the FT, also of the FTNY. He did not make it that day either. I see some emergency service cops there who I know from talking with my friends in emergency service, they didn't make it that day either. And you survived, you and your cameraman, who reunited for that special. When did you first get sent down there? After the first plane had struck?
I remember that the first tower was struck somewhere shortly after 8:30.
8:46.
I was in the office. I was in the office at that time. I'm expected in the newsroom at 9, and so by the time I stepped into the newsroom, the second plane had hit, and everybody's like, "All right." The managing editor was, assistant news director was like, "You're going here, you're going there, you go," and pointed at me and said, just go down there. And, what does that mean? That means, go to the World Trade Center. And so that's what we did.
After that terrible day and that ordeal, which you were very fortunate to survive, like I said, you were standing right there when it all came down.
Okay.
So many people did. You knew one of the engineers at ABC was killed in this attack. The New York Fire Department took a devastating hit. The police departments of the Port Authority of the NYPD took a devastating hit. And I remember John Miller telling me, I've heard a lot of things in the police radio. I've never heard a war transmitted. When somebody said, I believe the late Chief Bill Ali, who since passed away from 9/11 cancer, New York is under attack. That day, combined with the aftermath and being down at ground zero, and of course the years since, it's not easy to shake. What helped you recover emotionally?
Well, you know what? That's sort of inherent in the question, Mike, implies that I have recovered. I think that anybody who went through that experience, and there were people that had even closer calls than I did. Although we are lucky that we're here. Anybody who went through that is a changed person. So there's no question about that for me. I told the interviewers for the Channel 7 documentary and for others that I've appeared in that I've spent 20 years of my life running from 9/11. And what I did was, my way of coping with it was to pour myself into my work. If you look at the body of work after that, I went to Israel that year, in December of that year. I went, 2 years after that, I went to Iraq. I was in Kuwait 2 months before the war in Iraq. I covered the terrorist attacks in Europe, in London, and in Madrid, Spain. And then earthquakes, the earthquake in Haiti, the earthquake in Japan. I poured myself into my work because I was running from the planet. That was my way of coping, was to pour myself into it. And I resolved, around the 20th anniversary that, I need to face this. I need to talk about it, and that will help me through it. And I need to acknowledge also that that those events did change me, and that those events sort of inform my worldview in a lot of ways, and that I need to face that and acknowledge that. And facing it and acknowledging it in this past year has been very good for me.
Happy to hear that. I'm happy to hear that. And I think everybody, civilian, first responder, reporter, that was in the city during that time definitely feels it. And I know in talking with my NYPD and FDNY friends, whether they got down there as the plane struck or well after the towers had fallen, it's changed them. But, with any tragedy in life, and I'm sure you'll agree, there's two roads you can take, either bitterness or purpose. And it seems that you've chosen the latter, thankfully.
Right. I think that's a really good way to put it, because I do think that that's the choice, right? Bitterness or purpose. And, I resolved that 9/11 needs to make me, I need to come out of 9/11 as a more sensitive person, as somebody who recognizes the fragility of life. And if I can bring that to my job, and I've really tried to do that in the last 20 years, it's not just running from 9/11, but also if I can bring certain sensitivity to my interviews, to the way I tell a story, then it's not corrosive. 9/11 isn't going to eat me alive from the inside, and that was really an essential recognition for me, because I wouldn't be here otherwise, talking to you, doing this job, if I had taken another course. So you're right.
There is something that you mentioned earlier, and I want to touch on it, that it has enhanced your worldview and made you a more sensitive person. The last couple of years, New York, and by extension, the world, has faced a different kind of crisis, that being the coronavirus pandemic. Hopefully, we've passed the worst of it. Hopefully, now we can finally turn a corner and put it behind us. But nonetheless, the damage has certainly been done to New York, focusing strictly on that. And of course, relaying it from your experiences in 2001. how do you feel it specifically helped you to cover the coronavirus pandemic in New York, obviously with the factual presence that it needed, but also, as you just alluded to, with the sensitivity and delicacy required as well?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I think that one of the things that kept me going, not just as a reporter, but as somebody who lives here in the city, because I'm covering people I live with essentially, right? One of the things that kept me going was the understanding, the knowledge, the empirical sort of understanding that New York came back from 9/11. You know, 9/11 didn't destroy us. It took it took a lot of lives. You know, there's no question about that. Sorry, it's hard to talk about that.
I understand.
But it didn't destroy the city. The city came back. It took time. The city came back, and the city is a resilient place. I learned that from 9/11. And so that belief that the city is such a resilient place really helped me get through the last, couple of years, not only living in the pandemic, but covering the pandemic and being out in the streets every day. So I had this feeling all the time that New York would and could come back from the pandemic. Now, look, how long is it going to take? The impact on New York City as a result of 2 years plus of pandemic is different from 9/11. 9/11 was a shocking, out of the blue event. The pandemic sort of, descended on us, like a winter snowfall in a way that became a blizzard that buried us. But you don't get all the snow dumping on you all at once. You know what I mean? It's kind of like that. I mean, I'm just coming up with a metaphor, but that's sort of how it felt to me. And then before you know it, you're under 25 feet of snow. Like, wait, how did that happen? So yeah, I think it's going to take the city a while to come out of it, and the city is going to be different. 9/11 changed the city. Pandemic will change the city. But I just have to believe with so much capital here and so much creativity here that New York will find a way to get through this and to come out of it changed, but not changed in a bad way.
No, I would concur with that sentiment. And you still see reflections of that now, where New York, in some respects, has once again become the center of the universe for all the right reasons. And hopefully that recovery can continue. It'll take a while, but much like a prize fighter that's been knocked down, you get up again. It's kind of like the old Chumbawamba song, right? I get knocked down, but I get up again. That's what New
Right.
York has a history of doing. And so, focusing on that for a moment, New York is a bastion of many things, journalism being one of them. And you're very active with the National Academy of Television's Arts and Sciences' New York chapter. You know, given all the Emmys that you've been able to award your colleagues throughout the city, and given the Emmys that you yourself have won, do you view it as an opportunity and a means to give back to a profession that quite obviously has given so much to you?
Yeah, I do feel that way. And I tell people, and I say, you have to believe me, okay, that the only thing that's better than winning an Emmy is giving your friends Emmys, when they do great work. And that's one of the things that I've really tried to do in running and leading the New York chapter of the National Academy, is to build a sense of camaraderie. Look, many of us are competitors and we go out every day trying to eat the other guy's lunch. I mean, I get that. Okay? I'm like that myself, right? And it's a competitive business. But you know what? Literally at the end of the day, and I don't mean metaphorically, yes, and also literally at the end of the day, right? We're all doing the same job under the same circumstances, essentially, more or less the same way, with different audiences and different bosses. We have so much in common. And, the idea that the New York Emmys can bring all of us together is very exciting to me. I'm trying to get, and I hope my colleagues who are watching this take this to heart, that I'm really hoping that our fall gala, which is going to be in October, will be an in-person event. I mean, it's got to be, right? I'm hoping so that I want the New York Emmys to get to the point where, like the Academy Awards, even if you're not nominated, you still want to go because all your friends are there. You want to be seen there. All the bosses are there. The Academy Awards, the different studio executives are there. Well, with New York Emmys, I'll have the station executives there and the news executives there and the anchors there and the reporters there and the photographers and editors and the creative people, right? To bring everybody there so that they feel, you know what, that's the must-attend event of the year for media in New York. And I think we're getting there. We're getting to that point where people are going to say, you know what, I got to be there. I want my selfie on the red carpet and I want all this stuff out and really get together, have a good time, dancing and the after party and all of that. I really want to make it a must attend event because we do have a lot to celebrate in the New York media community. We have a lot to feel good about.
No, absolutely. And hopefully it can come to fruition. I think the summer will be key. If infections don't go up in the summer, maybe the fall can provide an opportunity for that, especially now as arenas start to get filled up again, ballparks start to get filled up again. Right. And it, so hopefully one thing can segue itself into another. I don't want to keep you too long because I know you're a busy man, you're on the run. So before I get to the concluding segment, I do want to ask you, you have been at this now, as you mentioned earlier, 35, 36 years, most of those years, decades spent in New York City. Most would say at this stage in your career, you have carte blanche and you've pretty much accomplished all there is to accomplish, but I'm sure you would disagree. So that said, what is still on your list of things that you would like to check off in a career that's seen you check off many things?
Well, what you're doing right now is something that would be fun for me to do. To do some kind of a podcast would be a lot of fun. I mean, you can tell me if it's not fun, but it looks fun. Looks like you're having a good time.
I am.
So that kind of thing is fun. I'd like to do some writing. I got a good taste of it when the New York Times and National Geographic came to me and said, would you write an essay on the 20th anniversary of 9/11 for us? And, I didn't hesitate. I'm like, yeah, okay, great. Let's do that. And then, it really forced me to focus on some things. So yeah, I think some writing would be good, whether it's a book, whether it's a bunch of essays. Also, I think that I'm a very, maybe you've gleaned this from the interview, I'm a very didactic person. I like to, I like to teach people things. And so I think that maybe doing some teaching would be a lot of fun for me, would be rewarding for me. I like to work with the young people who are just getting going in this business. A lot of people were very, very good to me, when I was trying to get going. And I always resolved that if I ever got anywhere, I would make a point to help people who are trying to come in behind me. And I've been true to that the last whatever years. And then there are going to be other ways to do it too, other ways to pay back and maybe doing some teaching also. I would like to do at some point maybe some work in documentaries. And so there's a lot, I feel that, I have left to do. Yes. Okay. It's a long resume. And at the end on July 10th, it'll be 33 years as a street reporter for Eyewitness News. That's a long time, but I still feel like, I've got a lot more good days than bad days, in any job. I mean, what's a bad, you might say, okay, well, Burkett, what's a bad day? Well, a bad day could be, having to go out and report in a blizzard, where you lose the feeling in your fingers and toes. It's like, okay, well,
or scorching heat wave.
Or a scorching heat wave. But I'm better with heat than I am with cold. But still,
Same.
You go, all right, well, you know what? I'm trading this day off because I get so many other cool things and stuff that I've been able to do. So I do think like it's still rewarding for me. So I do want to keep going. As long as I can continue to do the kinds of stories that I want to do, and have the kind of audience that I have, which is fantastic at Eyewitness News. I mean, I tell people that Channel 7 is the 7-Eleven of American television. Because everybody comes in for a cup of coffee,
Right.
The wealthiest people, working class people, people from all the different ethnicities. And I was talking about the diversity of New York City, which I find so rewarding. That's really great, and that's also responsibility. And I take all of that stuff very seriously. I mean, I didn't get into this business, to be famous or to make a lot of money. I got into this business because I like to tell stories. And when you want to tell stories, right, and that's what you're into, you want your stories to be seen. And when you're on Eyewitness News, a zillion people see it every night.
Yeah.
So that's so rewarding and so exciting when people stop you on the street and they say, well, I've been watching you for years, I mean, it's great. It's great. And people say, people will stop me, a couple times a month, 20 years later, we'll say, wow, I remember you in 9/11. A couple times a month, literally, people will stop me and say, oh, and you hugged that lady. And it's like, wow, you have an impact on people after all this time. So yeah, I'm going to keep that going. Do some other things too on top of that. So no, I mean, I'm really excited about it. I've got a body of work, but there's more to be done. I'm gonna add this one. I warned you that my answers go on forever.
It's fine.
But wait, who's doing this podcast anyway? So what I would say also though is that I feel like there's more to be done, and one of the things that really struck me was a couple of years ago, and it's on YouTube. We spent 24 hours straight, consecutive,
Yes.
in the busiest firehouse in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
And it's on YouTube, and it's called 24 Hours in the Firehouse That Never Sleeps. And, I thought, okay, going into this, all right, well, that's going to be interesting. It was my idea to do it, by the way. And I got with the fire department and really hooked it all up. And we followed the guys. We were in a chase car with lights and sirens. So we were right there at the fire when they arrived. And we had 2 working fires in a single 24-hour shift, which I was told was pretty amazing. So going into it, I thought, okay, well, I've covered firefighters for years. I said, okay, this is predictable. And I realized that I had so much more to learn about firefighting and how those guys do that job. And so, for me, as long as I continue to learn, that's a great thing. But also, I thought, I'd been thinking a few years prior to that, like, wow, what if my best work is behind me? Because I did a lot of good stuff. I went to a lot of places. I did a lot of good stuff. And I thought, wow, what if my best work is behind me? And then I did that piece on the firehouse. And I thought, wow, you know what? That's good. It's really good. And it inspired me, to do some more stuff. And so that's it's an example I bring up, but it was really rewarding for me and opened my eyes to some stuff.
No, and I love that video because I'm a huge fire department buff and police department buff, and that video is definitely one of my favorites. It's got over 1 million views too on YouTube, so it was popular. It went viral, as it should. I mean, they've been tracking the FDNY forever. You could trace it back to Report from Engine Company 82 by the late great
I read
Smith.
Yeah, Dennis Smith. I read it as a kid, and that was one of the things that inspired me to want to be in New York and to see these things. I was fascinated with all of his observations, and I mean, what a time to have been a firefighter. Later in life, I met him and shook his hand and told him how much his book meant to me as a teenager.
I interviewed him, and I cherish that interview now. He's since passed away, but I had the chance to have him on the show last year for my FDNY miniseries, The Best of the Bravest. And he was a gem to talk to. He was a gem and so knowledgeable right up until the end. Before I get to the concluding segment, I don't want to ignore this question. As promised, if you had one in the chat, I'd show NJ. It comes from FDNY Riggs, who has great content on his own right, I should say. He says, will you do more pieces on the fire department? Suggestion, the FDNY's rescue companies, or as they're known, Special Operations Command.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, that's great. If I can, you know what? I think it's a great idea, and it's something that's come in and out of my head since I did the report on the fire company Flatbush. I would definitely do it if I could get the same kind of access that I had, with these guys. I would absolutely do it. And what I've said to these guys, because I know many of them from the job over the years, and some guys who've retired. Those guys are the Navy SEALs of the fire department. They really are. They
Yeah.
really are. And the stuff that they do, I mean, it just blows me away. So yeah, I mean, if I can get it going, absolutely, I'd love it.
And I've said this before, the Special Operations Command of the FDNY was started in 1998, and Ray Downey was the guy that started it. He sadly was lost on 9/11. But I said this to Bob Gallione, a good friend of mine who did many of his years in Rescue 2 in Brooklyn. I said, Bob, if Ray could be around right now and see what SOC has become for the fire department, he'd be so proud. He'd be so proud. It's become a wonderful operation. Of course, you go to the NYPD side, the Emergency Service Unit, can't say enough about them and what they do. It's a unique, it's a unique bastion. I'll use that term again, of emergency work in New York City. So it'd be great to see you cover more of that. So you see, this wasn't painful. This 45 minutes, they flew by pretty easily. It's now time for.
Wait, Mike, hold on. Did you think it was going to be painful for you?
No, I thought you would find it painful having to put up with me.
Not at all. No. It's great. It's great. Good questions. Very good questions.
Thank you very much. And stick around. Don't say goodbye yet. We'll say goodbye off the air. But I do want to end, of course, on the air with the rapid fire segment. 5 hit and run questions from me, 5 hit and run answers from you. And you can say pass if you want. Are you ready? All right. Okay. Here we go. First, funniest story you've ever covered.
All right. That is not a question I would have expected. Okay. So now I have to think. You know what? I don't want to say unfortunately, but I don't have the kind of beat, and really haven't had the kind of beat over the years that that I get to cover funny stories. Funny things have happened to me while covering serious stories, like the time. Such as like the time that I was doing a story on a mafioso who'd been arrested. We were on the lawn of his house on Long Island, about to start the 11 o'clock show. Literally, they're into the open. This is Eyewitness News at 11, and all of a sudden, I'm standing there on the guy's lawn, and all of a sudden, I hear sprinklers are coming on, and now I'm about to get drenched on live TV, and the photographers around me started throwing their coats on the sprinkler heads. That's the only thing that saved me. And the other thing was I had just come back from a very serious, life-threatening assignment in Israel. And first day back, they decided that they were gonna play not play a joke on me. I mean, they were gonna stick it to me. And so my first assignment back after this covering a war in Israel for 3 weeks was there was a rash of thefts of large inflatable SpongeBobs from Burger King. They thought, all right, you know what? He's on his high horse about his Israel coverage. We're going to fix that. And yes, that was my assignment. So funny things happen to me. I don't always get to cover funny stories.
There you go. My sister's going to love that one because her and I grew up on that show. We can tell you literally every line from a SpongeBob episode. So if you could interview one person, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Wow. That's a really great question.
Thank you.
Wow. Well, let's see. I mean, I interviewed David Bowie.
Doesn't get much better than that.
No, I'm kidding. Although it was fascinating, actually. A bunch of people I've interviewed. Billy Joel a couple times. He's a terrific guy. But yeah, some presidents. But wow. Off the top of my head, who? Wow. I mean, I don't even know how to limit that.
Say pass if you want.
Yeah, let me pass. Right, and let me come back to that.
That's fine.
If the streaming service doesn't cut us off.
Hopefully not. Third, if not for journalism, what other career could you have seen yourself pursuing and enjoying?
I think. So does filmmaking count? No, that's part of journalism. Documentary filmmaking is part of journalism. I've often thought that I'd be a good professor, good college professor. I'd enjoy that. Some people would say acting or something, but it's no, I'd find that kind of limiting because it wouldn't be my own material. I don't know. That's a good question too. This lightning round is tough, Mike.
Fourth, favorite bar or restaurant in New York City?
Okay, yeah, hands down. It's my friend's restaurant, which is down in Soho. It's called Felix. It's a French restaurant. at the corner of West Broadway and Grand. In fact, I went there for my birthday the other night with my best friend and his girlfriend. It was great. I had a larger birthday party there last year. So yeah, Felix, but I have a couple of them that I really, really like. I like Cafe Luxembourg, which is on the Upper West Side near the TV station. Tudor City Steakhouse over on the East Side is really nice. Yeah, there are a bunch of them that I think are really, really super good. Waverly Inn, awesome place, beautiful place.
Fifth and finally, knowing what you know now, if you can go back in time and give advice to a younger version of yourself, what would you tell a young NJ Burkett?
I would say take a deep breath, keep pushing, but don't kill yourself. It's going to work out.
Yeah,
I needed to hear that back then.
There you go. I could use that now. So thank you. I'll run with that. This was great. Like for a little inside baseball for the audience, NJ's a busy man, and I've been chasing him for over a year now. I think 14, 15 months. So to finally conquer this today, you were one of the white whales of this show. So finally we were able to get you on. I appreciate you.
I don't know if I should be proud of that.
So before we go, like I said, stick around. Don't sign off yet. We'll say goodbye off the air. Any shout outs you want to give to anyone or anything?
Well, I would just say, I mean, the shout out I would give would be just to my colleagues in New York media. As I said before, is like we all work in different places for different people, different audiences and stuff. But we all do the same. We all do the same job, really. And I have so much respect for the others that are out here with me on the street. And especially, I do want to commend the people who went out in the street and worked during the pandemic. Who resolved that they were going to be out there in the street. I think being a reporter does entail signing on for a certain amount of personal risk. I'm not saying that everybody should go out and cover a war. That's not for everybody. I get that. But I do have a particular degree of respect for everybody that went out during the pandemic and said, you know what, this is tough. Be difficult emotionally, it might even be difficult physically, but that's the job, and I'm going to do it.
Well, this has been wonderful. Shout out to your cameraman who is putting up with both of us today. I appreciate it, sir. Shout out to the birds behind me. Thank you guys for making an appearance today. Much obliged, much appreciated. Coming up next on the Mike the New Haven podcast, this is a doubleheader today. NJ was first. He was the lieutenant special assignment in charge of not just one truck of the emergency service unit, but the entire unit citywide, a cop and a sergeant, and lastly, a lieutenant in ESU. He spent 22 of his 25 years in the department's most elite unit. You want to talk about the Green Berets of the NYPD? Those guys are it. For volume 12 of the E-Men inside the NYPD's emergency service unit, retired NYPD Lieutenant Special Assignment Al Baker will be the guest of honor tonight. So I'll see you at 6 o'clock for that show, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. In the meantime, on behalf of NJ Burkett, I'm Mike Colón, and we will see you next time. Take care, everybody. I'll see you in a few hours.